defense. That's literally the reason why he won. Okay? He is very good at telling a fucking story and playing a role. I don't know if FD will agree with me on this, but like that's why he fucking won the goddamn primary against the established name that is the fucking governor of this state. What gift? Here.
Someone said, why are we talking about Graham Plattner? Because I've been hearing about this.
No, not this one. Not this one. Doesn't he have another video on it? Not a recent one. No, this is the recent one called White Fatigue, right?
What I'm trying to make clear here is that
No, this is from 3 hours ago. I'm not. Isn't there one that's like, I think, yeah, this is the one. Why I left the white left.
I'm putting all white leftists on timeout until further notice. I've been hanging around y'all too long, and now I have lice. And black people shouldn't get lice. That it doesn't work like that for us. Lice in America cannot survive in black hair. Y'all probably don't realize that because a lot of y'all don't be knowing shit about us, but we already off topic. And the fact that I be explaining black people shit is kind of why I have this problem in the first place. We're going to start out talking Graham Plattner a little bit because he's a great framing tool for everything I want to get off my chest. I want to be really clear. I'm going to say that a lot in this video. I don't like this dude. He feels like a seasonal villain from a prestige political drama like House of Cards or Scandal or something. I'm not saying he's a Nazi, but he's at least like Hydra or Order of the Cyclops for those of you that watched Watchmen all those years ago. He just is that guy, and it's incredibly obvious to anyone who isn't some of y'all. And this isn't just taking issue with his military service. I don't have a purity politic toward anything, really, if you know me, but definitely not ex-military people on the left. I am anti-American military. Like, I don't want to misconstrue that. But there are also Black Panthers who are ex-military. The American military spends billions of dollars marketing and propagandizing young people across this country. So I try to hold a nuanced position for how that works. But I wouldn't apply this to Plattner. 4 tours and Blackwater and a Nazi tattoo is a lot. And I know that's not a hot take. I know even more moderate folks would agree with that. So I have to wonder why and how is Plattner being pushed so hard by the establishment and the online left in general? Plattner is the latest project out of the Fight Agency. The Fight Agency is a political consultancy that was started by some ex-Bernie Sanders, ex-John Fetterman folks. And in recent years, they've been behind the success of Zohran Mamdani, as well as people like Dan Osborne, Bob Brooks, etc. And aside from Zohran Mamdani, you kind of see what's happening here. All we're missing is Hank Hill. Like, the main, mostly valid argument that I will get about Plattner is that he's one of the few folks amongst the Democrats that vows to pull military support from Israel.
Not a single taxpayer dollar should be spent.
By the way, a lot of people consistently point to me talking about Graham Plattner being an exceptional communicator as like defense. That's literally the reason why he won. Okay? He is very good at telling a fucking story and playing a role. I don't know if FD will agree with me on this, but like that's why he fucking won the goddamn primary against the established name that is the fucking governor of this state. Okay? That's just true. It's objectively true. Okay? I don't think this should be beyond the fucking pale.
On arming and defending a country that commits a genocide.
And that is extremely important for Palestinian liberation. But I do have to ask, why are we being asked to not just tolerate Plattner for that reason, but to see him almost as the future of the Democratic Party and maybe even the left? Why has he become the darling of the online, predominantly white left in this time frame? Why did the Fight Agency scout him in the first place? It's because the Fight Agency knows that this image of white American exceptionalism and especially masculinity is still highly valued amongst the white masses. He's doing a reskin of the Marlboro Man, or better yet, like Don Draper, Joel Miller from The Last of Us. Literally, he looks like Walter White. And I want you to remember, all of these characters were villains. And historically, it's always straight white men that...
No one ever said that on the left side? No, I mean, I think there were a lot of people who were glazing the shit out of Graham Plattner, and that's what he's referencing. Like, look, and FD will attest to this, both in private correspondence, but also my public statements, that like I always hedged my Graham Plattner commentary with his red flags. But there were definitely a lot of people that were very excited about how charismatic he presented himself as.
Fail to realize that fact about those characters. And when you're not a straight white male,
Like you've been glazing platinum for months. If there is no difference in my commentary on Graham Plattner versus what I've said and what I've done for Daria Lisa, Chris Rabb, Claire Valdez, Adam Hamawi, Abdul Al Sayed, why have I been doing any of this? Why have I been doing any of this? You hedge, but come on, man. But why have I been doing any of this shit? Did you see the same level of excitement, the same level of support that any number of different people received? Or was it just me arguing against chatters like yourself that would sometimes make very stupid comparisons? Like, oh, well, why not Kamala Harris then? What did I tell you? If Kamala Harris had the same platform as Graham Plattner, she would have won, okay? And yes, I would have fucking door knocked for her. Like I said, if Kamala Harris came out swinging against Israel's genocide, what did I tell you? I was like, it's too significant of a race to just fucking ignore.
you always take note of those types of fans. They may not be the worst people in the world, but they're people to observe. But the left falling for the same trick like this is not surprising when you realize that white leftists in America have never consistently had a halfway decently developed racial analysis. And this is just a historical pattern at this point. Again, shout out to a book I've been reading from Brian Quoba, Hubert Harrison, The Forbidden Genius of Black Radicalism. Hubert Harrison was a lesser known black socialist who worked and wrote in the same eras as Booker T. Washington, Du Bois, and Garvey, and was to the left of all of them during that time, including Du Bois.
I don't think Plattner's popularity up here is due to his Israel take as much as it's due to his healthcare take. No, I agree. For sure.
But in this, he also found himself confounded by the challenge of organizing with white socialists who at the time could not see past their anti-blackness to form effective solidarity and build a functional coalition. And this pattern has never stopped repeating, which is illustrated by this excerpt from Eugene Debs that's in the book. In capitalism, the Negro question is a grave one and will grow more threatening as the contradictions and complications of capitalist society multiply, Debs allowed. But this need not worry us. Let them settle the Negro question in their way if they can. We have nothing to do with it, for that is their fight. Debs here exemplified the way in which even radical white people who called for a working class revolution against capitalism could simultaneously distance themselves from the specific challenges facing the most oppressed segment of the working class. I'm bringing this up because I want to show that this is an infinite loop at this point. White leftists with little to no racial analytical frame can't help but censor their sensibilities, even in the face of obvious red flags. Or
this is 100% accurate. Okay, it's true. What do I always fucking say? There is no path to socialism, to developing socialism in this country without black socialism. Capital B, black socialism. Straight up. That's it. Black people are a obviously fundamentally important part of the American working class. But beyond that, they've also been at the forefront of every civil rights and every working man's struggle in this country historically. Okay. And yes, given the unique nature of anti-blackness in this country, because the white supremacist shape always takes the form of anti-blackness at the end of the day. This doesn't mean that like anti-brown behavior is not also baked into the system. Islamophobia is also not baked into the system. But anti-blackness is very specific. It has been a fundamental plank of American culture, American existence, and therefore it needs to always have its own care and consideration.
Clearly better options if they don't appeal to their aesthetics and need to censor themselves. Why have we centered Graham Plattner when we have Chris Rabb, who, from what I understand, is the furthest left candidate the Democrats have ever had in any political race? And he low-key still fits the gruff leftist daddy kink that so many of y'all seem to like. Another face that I haven't seen on my feed at all and I had to get from somebody else is Charles Booker. Booker has as progressive an agenda as you can have in mainstream politics and is in a very vulnerable red state that could use a lot more attention and support from the online left. And
the only thing I'll say here is the electoral calculation for Graham Plattner looked far better than Booker. That's it. I mean, Booker's dope. I've talked about Charles Booker. I've talked about how, I would love to go and work with him if he wants my help. But Booker's in Kentucky. It's a far, far, far more difficult hill to climb than like what seemed to be an easy lock state in Maine, because Susan Collins is like finally going to get taken out.
Not there. Booker's not just anti-sending weapons to Israel. He's Medicare for all. He's for universal basic income, stopping data centers, decriminalizing poverty, and reparations. Is everything you can want from a mainstream politician, but he's invisible compared to Plattner. I don't follow elections much unless it's local, but I have seen Plattner's face a million times more than either Rob or Booker. Rob did spend some time with Hasan. Booker, he's got nothing as far as I can tell. Meanwhile, Plattner has tons of interviews, Majority Report, Mehdi Hasan, New York Times. Why is this happening? Why is that viable? From my perspective and experience, a lot of white leftists understand that it's bad to be racist, but they don't actually understand why racism is bad or how it works. The absence of a critical understanding of how whiteness works is why a lot of them fall for the same trick over and over, to the point where the fight agency clearly has this type built out just for y'all. If you want to vote for Plattner as an odious candidate that will help end military support to Israel, go ahead, but it should be treated as a tainted compromise for the sake of a free Palestine, not a vision for the future of the left. He should not be in our faces as much as he is. He should not have the defenders that he has that I know will show up in this comment section. He should be the online left's sneaky link that you never see in the light of day and never talk about in public. And the fact that so many white leftists don't feel this is sadly par for the course. The red flags that he has don't bother some of y'all because those red flags have never been weaponized against you. But when you're someone who's historically been targeted by this archetype, you pay attention to those patterns. You don't compromise with that. For reasons I won't get into, I've had to spend the last few weeks arguing that normalizing Nazi terminology, but wokely, is bad and that no one on the left should be doing it. And I've had some, not many, I want to be clear, but plenty of white leftists try to argue that nobody cares about Nazis, as if a couple of Nazis didn't just shoot up a mosque in San Diego just a few weeks ago, or the fact that that exact type of Nazi.
Why are we watching this victim mentality? Dog, come on. Come on. You are playing the fucking stereotype, man. This is not victim mentality, motherfucker. This is critical analysis. And also, it's correct. Like, this is the moment of vindication for FD Signifier. It's kind of ridiculous to still double down on your blind spot instead of just being like, you know what, maybe this is a good opportunity of Graham Plattner were people like FD Signifier, Sean the Black, Chris Rabb. Okay? Even AOC shied away from an endorsement. And if you recall, there were a lot of people who were yelling at Chris Rabb when Chris did that interview with Crystal Ball. And I had to come in with a little bit of course correction, even in this community, where I said, look, Chris Rabb, as opposed to Graham Plattner, is someone who I have lent support to, who I have actually, gone and campaigned with and put the weight of this community behind. And there's a reason for that. Okay. Like, his skepticism turned out to be correct. Our lack, or my limited amount of skepticism, was not correct. Notwithstanding the conversations about broader issues, about like how, veterans are this or that, I'm not having that conversation right now, even though many people will take those conversations and will slam it in. Or even, what kind of attacks you receive if you come out as someone who is critical of Israel. Because if you recall, like, Zay Squirrel also immediately was like, this guy's a fucking no good candidate and is bad, Blackwater mercenary. But even Zay Squirrel, alongside myself, had the same exact assessment with the New York Times report, right? Where they also said the same thing I did, that this kind of feels like a hit job. It turns out that there was a lot more evidence that the New York Times did not report on for one reason or another. It's remarkable that they did not report on those reasons and simply left the assessment of this allegation as someone who had one weird moment with Graham Plattner, but ultimately was fine with Graham Plattner. It turns out she wasn't fine with that, right? Don't throw Majority Report under the bus. I'm never going to throw Majority Report under the bus. I'm not going to throw Kyle Kalinske under the bus. I think it's important to recognize blind spots, myself included. Having said that, I totally understand why they were in support. A lot of these people that were in support of Graham Plattner were also in support of Kamala Harris in ways that were far more meaningful than, my assessment of that race, right? They were doing harm reduction and lesser evil voting arguments. This is consistent with their principle, right? If someone is going to do harm reduction arguments for Kamala Harris, then of course they're going to make, of course they're going to be in the tank for Graham Plattner. FD was in support of Kamala too. Yeah. Did you not hear him literally also do? Yes. FD Signifier is also a harm reductionist. Okay. He literally said, look, you're going to vote for Graham Plattner. Just don't make him the face of the movement. That's all he's saying. And I think a lot of people don't listen to the nuanced criticism here. He is quite literally saying, look, if you're going to vote for Graham Plattner, that's fine. But there's obviously a lot of red flags and you shouldn't make him the face of a movement. You shouldn't be giving him this much coverage. You know what I mean? I think you didn't go as hard on him as the same reason people get scammed because you wanted it to be true. Of course I wanted him to be the base, commie former veteran that is anti-imperialist, but he's hiding his fucking, he's hiding how radical he is. Turns out he was hiding his real experiences, just not in the direction that I hoped he was. But once again, the skepticism still remained. It was something that I wanted to make a personal assessment on. And unfortunately, well, I guess not even unfortunately, I guess I fortunately never had the opportunity to do so, especially considering, holy shit, the amount of cooking that I'd be receiving in this circumstance would probably be even harder than that, regardless of the fact that I didn't lend him the same level of support at all. You had chatters in here saying that FD was calling you out for making him the face of the movement. Nobody listens to what they watch anymore, man. I know.
Terrorism happens every 6 to 18 months in America. And it's impossible to remain in community or struggle with people who don't seem to mind that, who always put themselves first, especially when the struggle isn't about them in the first place. And after half a decade online, I'm tired of seeing this pattern and repeating these same complaints. But the problem is that this entire space has always catered to a specific type of white guy online. And that's what it was built for and what it always probably will be. See, BreadTube emerged as a venue to rehabilitate right-wing edgelords into leftist progressives, all after the rise of the alt-right. It has always had an extremely high tolerance for what Graham Plattner is, because he's just like them for real. And while not every aspect of BreadTube has catered to this reformed edgelord Reddit troll archetype, it's clear that this element of the space remains influential and often sets the tone for the space. Because even if these types don't make up the largest part of our audiences, they're almost always the loudest part, always the most online and the most active of the bunch. So let's talk about some drama for a bit. For years, I have not responded to drama publicly. And any drama from other creators whose opinions I don't care about, you haven't heard me talk about it publicly. And the reason for this is people don't care. People don't care about petty squabbles between creators that agree with each other 90% of the time. None of this is really material to any useful action toward a free Palestine or any social issue that you might care about. So rarely do I dedicate time to it.
And also people will couch a lot of content creators, their entire thing is just their output, right? Which is content. And if they actually swing in the direction of drama, if they start swinging their content in the direction of drama, they start generating a lot of value. They start, generating revenue off of that. And obviously, if they're a political commentator, they can't simply be only the drama channel. So they have to put a layer of political criticism on top of the actual drama that they're engaging in. And there are a lot of people who do this. I try to stay away from this all the time. Unfortunately, YouTube monetizes it. But let's be real. There are a shit ton of content creators. I'm not going to name any fucking names, okay? There are a shit ton of content creators who almost entirely focus on drama. And they simply add a little bit of political shine to it to make it seem like there are, serious political disagreements here. And this is a serious advocacy. And these are These are very important disagreements that must be addressed, when in fact all they're doing is shit stirring, lying about the background of individuals, and adding a good deal of like click chasing and clickbaiting into the process. Okay.
In a serious sense.
They moralize the drama, and oftentimes the drama is not even about political disagreements. It's about personal grievances that they cannot simply come out and admit is a personal grievance. You do this too. There's not a single person that I've ever done this to, and as a matter of fact, the evidence of that is even at times when I've agreed with something that Destiny has said. And that motherfucker has spent the last 7 years of his entire life trying to focus every single bit of his political output on doing exactly what I just said. If someone, even if I despise them, if someone is on the right side of an issue, and they come out and it's a broken clock situation, I will say it. Okay? Yeah, you don't do this to Ben Shapiro? Yeah, I don't.
Just thrive off drama, and they can't attract an audience otherwise. I am not one of those creators. So I want to apologize up front to the vast majority of people who will watch this and have no clue where this is coming from. But with that in mind, I won't be naming names. And to be clear, a lot of the things I'm going to say aren't going to be intended explicitly towards a few people. And it's more so me responding to a problem I've been seeing forever in the space as a whole. But before I even go there, let me clarify some things. I am unequivocally a supporter of a free Palestine. I see Palestine as a colonized nation, and no, I do not think Israel has a right to exist because it is an imperial project and cannot exist as anything but an imperial project. I do not even condemn Hamas. And I've had this stance on decolonization for years. If you pay attention, I don't know if this is a shocking thing to hear me say. It's only that probably if you haven't been paying attention, but a lot of y'all only, we'll get there. You cannot put limitations on how colonized people fight their oppressors. So no, I won't condemn Hamas the same way I wouldn't condemn the Mau Maus in Kenya or the Nat Turner slave rebellions or the Haitian Revolution or the IRA in Ireland. All of these entities were called terrorists at the time of their existence by their oppressors, and all are recognized as liberation movements today, despite the ugliness those movements may have existed in. And I believe Hamas will eventually be seen in the same light. I would love if violence didn't have to occur. And there are anti-colonial movements that do happen to occur with the minimal violence, but it's not fair to call any anti-colonial violence senseless because it is a direct response to the condition that the colonized are living under. And the thing to keep in mind is that Palestinians didn't just start getting genocided by Israel on October 7th, 2023. Now, I've seen people say that I've said nothing about the genocide in 3 years. And those people do not watch me. I've expressed my support for Palestine in multiple videos across multiple channels. One thing I'm really interested in with Palestine right now is because there's very obviously bad faith actors trying to involve themselves on all sides of the issue. Oh shit, it's 4,000 people in here. What the fuck? Let's talk about Palestine, motherfuckers. There are students across the country at college campuses protesting and putting their personal lives and futures in jeopardy for free Palestine. There are professors getting arrested and detained right up the street from where I live at this point, at Emory University. Limbaugh's a racist. Glenn Beck is a racist. Gaza Strip was getting bombed. Obama didn't say shit. Did Lupe Fiasco, one of the biggest rappers in the world, low-key say free Palestine way back in 2011? Yes. Yes, he did. But my content is made for Black people, and the people I'm talking about usually are not Black. And so some of these newfound critics will just lie and say I've been silent, and this is being used to paint me as a person who is both sizing a genocide or a liberal Zionist or a Philo-Semite. I have very purposely never presented myself as a key voice on Palestine, which I don't think anyone sincerely is asking me for, but that has allowed for, I'll say, unprincipled people to make up narratives about my position when I dare to say something as bold as,
hey, maybe don't use Nazi dog whistles because you had a disagreement with someone on Twitter.
And instead of acknowledging that reasonable and extremely low bar of decency in this space, folks would rather accuse me of being a liberal Zionist. And I think the only reason why this FD doesn't care about Palestine narrative has gotten legs, because I didn't make a definitive FD signifier Palestine video on my main channel. And some may see that as a lack of conviction, so let me clear that up as well. First, I want to engage with this idea that a video on Palestine would have been bad for my channel in some form or fashion. And this is just not based in reality. In fact, the opposite is true. Palestine videos, especially 2 years ago, were very popular. Sean's Palestine video 2 years ago is the second most watched video of the last 5 years. And even today, videos on the genocide can pull in good views. You never know how
How much longer does he talk about like his own personal background? Because I know FD's takes. I know his position on this. He's just like addressing the drama, and I don't know if it's like pertinent to the conversation that we're having about Grant Plattner. And you guys should watch the video. I mean, it already got almost 500,000 views. Is the rest of it just drama, like related, where he's just like discussing his perspective in general? What are you looking for? I'll give you a timestamp. Oni, oh yeah, Oni edited this. Oni, is the rest of it not about Plattner? Racism isn't drama? No, racism isn't drama. But he's talking about the racist attacks that he's receiving. And I'm watching this video specifically on his accurate assessment on Graham Plattner, the red flags, and why a lot of people don't see it. A lot of people stream on here just watching you. I don't get why they even stream. What? I don't know. Like,
multinational data mining platform so they could advertise AI girlfriends and PragerU in between me talking about political prisoners and black revolutionaries. It's just felt gross. Further, in the aftermath, I was somehow branded as a prison reform expert. Like, I remember having people reach out to me to play themselves, but don't tell
Oni says, go back to 21.
People to make up for his past sins. And my rehab is, trying to say distorted, and you literally cannot fix it. I know that a lot of these white leftists have zero shame, zero self-awareness, and zero interest in actual coalition building on this platform if it means they might have to decenter themselves. And that brings me back to Plattner. Plattner is popular because he's BreadTube personified. He is the former edgelord rehabilitated into the hero for oppressed people to make up for his past sins. And mind you, every piece of anti-colonial liberation theory that you will ever read will tell you that the colonized must free themselves, but don't tell that to your favorite BreadTuber or favorite BreadTube fan, because they'll swear that it's them that's the key to liberation for insert other group here. But further, Plattner shows the failure of the American left presenting a principled anti-Zionist stance to a larger general public. I've noticed in my personal life and online that there's been a rise in what I'm going to describe as America First anti-Zionism. And normally when I make up a new term, I want credit for it, but please do not repeat. I'm positive there is somebody more worthy, some actual Palestinian scholar that is saying the exact same thing I'm saying. So find them and give them credit for that term. But Plattner is a perfect example of what that is.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is this: we are all victim to our environment. Okay. And what we see and what we do, it shapes our reality. It shapes our worldview. And sometimes we end up engaging in analysis that might betray a broader systemic factor that's not being seen. I will stand by the notion that I have over and over again, that I've repeated over and over again. Graham Plattner is not a product of the online left. Graham Plattner was hand-selected by, I guess, the fight agency. But having said that, what made Graham Plattner popular was not the online left. The online left, Majority Report, myself, if you consider me to be a major booster of Graham Plattner, Pod Johns, these people have a lot of influence. But they cannot make or break elections, no matter how big or small. Graham Plattner became a national figure because people in Maine voted for him. Liberals in Maine voted for him. And this is very important to identify and understand. We have to recognize this, because that is who voted for Graham Plattner, and that's who might even still to this day want Graham Plattner to remain in the race. Okay? I don't think Graham Plattner was carried into victory by bread tubers or Majority Report or myself or any number of different people, right? Unless you personally think, like, if your argument is, Hasan, you've done Graham Plattner, you're the reason why Graham Plattner ran, you're the reason why this issue is happening. You found him, you hand selected him, you work for the fight agency, whatever, right? If that's like your assessment, and there are some who are maybe leaning into that direction a little bit, okay? What you have to remember is, do you think I have, or do you think Majority Report has captivated the minds of every 65-plus-year-old college-educated white suburbanite in Maine? Do you think that's the reason why Graham Plattner is successful? Because they were all locked in on the Majority Report? Or do you think that there was genuine momentum behind his candidacy at a time when people were looking for someone to express their left populist rage? Okay? The reason why this is very important, to identify is because the replacement has to, in some way, shape, or form, embody that left populist rage. Because if that doesn't happen, a lot of people are going to be very frustrated and they're not going to vote and they're going to think, oh, they rat fucked him. And I think that there are a lot of people in Maine that probably don't even want him to drop out. We've seen that. On Twitter, everyone's like, Graham Plattner, you got to drop out. On Blue Sky, they're doing victory laps, okay? But on Instagram, on Facebook, where the normies are, they fucking love Graham. On TikTok comments, people are saying, you shouldn't drop out, King. This is an Israel concocted narrative. Okay? They're saying that shit's fake. Politicians are calling him to drop out, but the voters are saying, remain in the race, King. Okay? That's important. That's important to understand. That's important to identify. I'm not saying this is correct. I'm not saying this is good. Okay? What I'm saying is this. That's how much legitimacy he was able to garner. That's how much there is an appetite for a change candidate that people, paired up with their lack of interest due to patriarchal constructs, their lack of interest in recognizing a rape victim when they see one, right? And the amount of influencing power a white man has, the amount of Teflon that a white male candidate clearly has, especially when they come from a veteran background where people are just like, that's my fucking guy. I will ride into the depths of hell. That's why I've said, ironically enough, this is the true liberal Trump. Okay? This is the true liberal Trumpian candidacy. That we have to take note. We have to take note of where the success came from. And we have to factor that into who the replacement should be.
Because while he does claim to want to stop aid from Israel, he also wants to improve military recruitment. So he is not against American imperialism like you might think, which undermines any anti-Israeli stance he holds. And that's typical of pretty much all the Democrats right now. The sad reality is that the Democratic Party and the alleged progressive leaders in America have allowed themselves to be outmaneuvered on Zionism by the likes of Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, unlike anti-Zionists on the left, are in fact obvious anti-Semites. Tucker Carlson is a crypto white supremacist who has spent years trying to normalize the Great Replacement theory, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is a former QAnon adherent who brought us Jewish space lasers and believes in blood light. Yet both are being mainstreamed in a way that I wouldn't have thought possible just a few years ago. People like Carlson and Greene have have infinitely more reach and influence than any of your favorite bread tubers. And thus they have been able to frontline this American first anti-Zionism, and it's become a popular position. It feels like for the first time ever, and this is a good thing, and I'll explain why in a second, anti-Zionism is a popular sentiment to hold. But anti-Zionism that is America first is letting America off the hook for its role in that genocide. I've had a lot of people, both online and in my encounters in real life, smart people, say something along the lines of Israel is controlling America. And no, the tail does not wag the dog. Israel is a settler colonial project built on genocide and mass murder. America is a settler colonial project built on genocide and mass murder, among other things. Game, recognized game. There are, of course, Zionists in American government and plenty of Zionists who are at the helm of powerful American institutions. And our current president does seem uniquely compromised in his ability to not be influenced, not just by Israel, but everyone. Like, it's everybody gets a piece of our president. But please believe that confluence of power between Israel and Zionists in America is not some secret, like, mystical thing. That's just how power and capitalists have always worked. One example of this America first anti-Zionism is, like, people often say America was forced or tricked into a war with Iran due to Israel, but this ignores the history of hostility America has had with Iran. Iran, as a sovereign, strong nation, has been able to withstand American influence and thus impedes on America's dominance of that region and the resources that Iran controls, even with Israel sitting at Iran's doorstep. And Israel, because of its Zionist nature, has always wanted to attack Iran, along with everyone else in that region for years. But for the longest, America has not allowed them to, because most American presidents fully understood that we probably can't win a war with Iran, which, if you're paying attention, is clearly correct. But that doesn't mean that we didn't desire to do the exact same thing Israel did. This is why you see so many other American politicians wanting more action from America in Iran, low-key on both sides of the aisle. America has not just allowed, but has encouraged Israel to be exactly what it is for decades at this point. It's just that this time around, Palestinians were able to show the world what is happening to them. And I want to be clear, Palestinians do not care and should not care how they get free or who in America is going to bring them to that point. If they get free because of a right-wing regime ushered in by Tucker Carlson decides to act on their innate hatred of Jewish people and pull support from Israel, that's an us problem. That's not a them problem. There's a great short essay from Laith Marouf, again, I apologize if I got that wrong, where he's responding to a recent interview where Norm Finkelstein basically says exactly what I'm saying here. But Marouf comes back to reiterate that none of that is the Palestinians' concern. Marouf says literally, why is it so hard to believe that America first could actually be Israel last? So if the left, and by that, I don't just mean us here on YouTube, although we are somewhat to blame, if the left can't present a crystal clear principled stance against Zionism to combat the nationalistic and ultimately fascist version that's taking a hold everywhere, including somewhat on the left, then we're fucked and we deserve it.
I don't like how Hassan is framing the situation as the online left has no responsibility in platforming Plattner in a positive way, regardless of how main voters voted. It's just a lack of accountability. It's my least favorite statement. It's my least favorite word. And I know people will clip this and be like, oh, yeah, see, he hates accountability. It just doesn't mean anything. Okay? It just doesn't mean anything. Like, what do you mean? Like, I say it too at times. But, like, what does it mean? What would accountability look like? Like, what would you want me to do? What would you want, I don't know, like Majority Report to do? Because I saw pieces of Emma's takes earlier where she did hold herself accountable. Like, she said, look, I apologize. I was duped by this person to a certain degree. I really pushed for this person. But, like, in my situation, it's like, what do you want me to not cover the fucking main Senate race at all? Calling out the Nazi tattoo? Why did so many people minimize that? Wait, but I did do that. So what? I did numerous tweets, numerous extensive hours of coverage. So what do you want me to do about that? Like, answer clearly. Use your words. Like, what would you like me to do about that? That was actually a big part of my criticism as well. So, I think for a lot of people, it turns into, it basically turns into like this whole thing where it's like, I want you to satisfy my needs. Like, I'm watching this video because there were red flags that I myself also overlooked in terms of, in an effort to maintain some kind of like stable left populist momentum, right? not overlooked necessarily because I did bring them up, but it wasn't enough for me to be like, fuck this guy. And if you're asking me to say fuck this guy when the alternative was Susan Collins or Janet Mills, I wasn't going to do that, right? There is a level of buildup that we had to reach for me to say that. Okay. Does that make sense? I mean, this is something that I've made, I think, very clear. Something that I've made very clear over and over again is that, like, there is a level of like accusation pile on, especially where it's coming from is also important, because a lot of these accusations weren't just coming from the anti-imperialist left flank, some of the ultras in this community, some of the wreckers in this community who were actually saying unhinged things, as opposed to like reasonable critique. But yeah, I mean, this is me talking about his tattoo. You know what, Platter being a Nazi? Yes, of course I'll be speaking about that as well. Dude, you think this community is going to let me live that down? Are you kidding me? My most ethical voting decision in Maine. It is to me, okay? I've already made my most... So, I think people are rightfully mad that you dismissed the New York Times allegations, especially considering Rascott is mentioned in the name in the article. No, I stand by that. You actually did defend the tattoo at the time, but there isn't anything I or any of us should demand you do. I stand by that. The New York Times report. Should we go back to the New York Times reporting on Rasico? And no, I did not defend the Nazi tattoo. Should we go back and read the New York Times report on Rasico? Do you guys want to go through that again? Because the New York Times literally said it was worrying. That's it. That Rasico had a troublesome. The New York Times report said Rasico had a troublesome experience. They did not put down the credible accusations of rape that Rasico made in the Politico report. If the New York Times, as a matter of fact, ironically enough, at the time I said, if the New York Times report had a credible accusation of rape, that would be an irredeemable red line. I don't think you remember my coverage of the New York Times report. And it wasn't just even about Rasico. I said that there was a Republican operative, right, Fifield, who had made accusations, the primary accusations of the New York Times report anchored around. And those accusations, according to the New York Times' own assessment, did not reach that standard. According to Fifield's own assessment, did not reach that same standard. And at the time I said, look, regardless of whether Fifield is a Republican operative or not, if she had contemporaneous conversations at the time with a serious accusation of rape, then that would be the red line. That would be considered irredeemable. I was very clear on this. It wouldn't even matter that she is a Republican operative at that point, because that would be a red line. That'd be an irredeemable red line. Hold on. Sorry. In any case, this was the white fatigue.
Clear here
FD
is that
streams.
Rob, myself, Sean DeBlack, a lot of other black folks, we have explained this to y'all before. That's the real black fatigue. That, like, literally, that is what black fatigue actually is. It's black folks being tired of having.
He literally had rape allegations before this. Why are we being obtuse now? No, he didn't. He did not. What are you talking about? I said what I said, y'all. This was a blind spot for y'all in the space. I'm speaking from my experience as a black man who sees shit like this and understand why the space struggles with POC. Where is the rape allegation? No. You can say you were skeptical because you've seen, charismatic white men dupe a lot of people. That's fair. That's what FD Signifier's assessment is. Okay. But you can't say there was already like credible rape allegations and people just overlooked it. Where were the credible rape allegations? You can't just like drop that in here. The Politico article that actually solidified this reporting unironically also reported that there were no rape allegations against Graham Plattner up until that reporting. Up until yesterday, up until 24 hours ago, there were no credible rape allegations or rape allegations at all. So where are you coming from with this?
Having to explain racism to white people. Let's get into this nonsense. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I haven't actually watched any of the coverage. I've just seen the aftermath.
Okay, this is 48 minutes long.